So what if I told you that one of the biggest breakthroughs in modern neuroscience, this idea that our brains can physically change, wasn't discovered in some high-tech lab, but was actually described in an ancient text written thousands of years ago?
Yeah, it's a huge question, right? And that's exactly where we're going to dig into. We're going to explore this wild idea that a spiritual instruction manual might have also been a biological one all along.
Okay, so this all centers around a passage from Romans, chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, for centuries, people have read this as purely spiritual advice. But what if it's something more? What if it's a literal biological instruction? The key, and this is the really cool part, is in that one word, transformed.
You see, in the original Greek, the word used there is metamorphoo. It's where we get our word metamorphosis. Now, this isn't just about a small tweak in your attitude. We're talking about a total structural change from the inside out. I mean, think about a caterpillar literally dissolving and rebuilding its entire cellular structure to become a butterfly. The text is describing that level of fundamental internal restructuring.
But here's the thing. For the longest time, this idea of a complete internal change, well, it flew right in the face of science. Because for centuries, the scientific consensus was that the adult brain just couldn't change. So the old school thinking was that your brain was basically set, like hardened clay, By the time you were an adult, your habits, your personality, your anxieties, all of that stuff was seen as pretty much permanent. But modern science has completely shattered that idea. We now know the brain is incredibly plastic, constantly reorganizing itself based on what we do and, more importantly, what we think. And that brings us to the game changer. The scientific discovery that completely flipped that old idea on its head is something called neuroplasticity. It's the biological mechanism that makes the kind of transformation we're talking about physically possible.
So what is it really? In the simplest terms, neuroplasticity is your brain's incredible ability to physically rewire itself. The connections between your brain cells, your neurons, can get stronger, they can get weaker, or they can be totally replaced. And the main driver of all this change? It's repetition. What you consistently focus on literally shapes the physical structure of your brain.
Okay, so let me break this down for you because it's actually pretty cool. Imagine your brain is like a big field of tall grass. The very first time you have a new thought, it's like trying to walk through that field. It's tough, right? But if you walk that exact same path over and over again, what happens? You start to create a trail. That's exactly what happens with your neurons. When you repeat a thought, the same neurons fire together, and their connection gets stronger. Do it enough, and that little trail becomes a superhighway. The thought becomes automatic, fast, and easy.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it brings us right back to those ancient texts. The disciplines described in so many traditions, things like meditation, prayer, focused thinking, they suddenly look less like abstract exercises and more like methods of focused repetition. They're designed to carve out new neural pathways.
I mean, listen to the language used in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 33. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. That's not the language of suggestion, is it? It's the language of engraving. It's describing something being permanently imprinted right into the core of a person.
So, what we're looking at here might not just be pretty poetry. This starts to look a lot like a functional description of a physical process. It's as if the text is laying out a blueprint for how to intentionally take part in the rewiring of your own brain.
And you know what? This actually explains so much. It explains why just trying harder to change something, using pure willpower, well, why it almost never works. That's like fighting your way through a dense forest with a tiny hatchet while that old negative thought superhighway is running right next to you. It's exhausting. The blueprint suggests a totally different approach, training, intentionally building a new highway through repetition until it becomes the new default route. And the cool part is, the results of this kind of rewiring, they aren't just some abstract idea. They are real, tangible things you can feel. People who do this find their emotional reactions actually start to soften. Peace becomes more accessible even when life is chaotic. They can handle stress better, their thinking gets clearer. It's not about just coping with old patterns, it's about actually installing new ones. There's another passage that just illustrates this whole idea so perfectly. Psalm chapter 119 verse 130 says, "The entrance of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple." Now notice that phrasing. It doesn't say that truth fights darkness. It says it gives light. Light doesn't argue with darkness, it just shows up and the darkness is gone. By this logic, focusing on building new, true thoughts isn't about wrestling with the old ones, it's about introducing something new that makes them irrelevant.
Okay, so when you put it all together, when you look at cutting-edge neuroscience next to these ancient ideas, you start to arrive at a pretty stunning conclusion.
And it's this. Science, with all its amazing technology and labs, didn't actually discover the principle of a changeable mind.
It feels a lot more like it's just now catching up. It's giving us the biological language for a process that was laid out in what you could almost call a user manual for the human brain. The blueprint was there all along. We're just now getting the science to prove it.
And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to think about. We know for a fact our brains are constantly changing, constantly being rewired, whether we're paying attention to it or not. Our culture, our habits, our media, they're all carving pathways in our minds. So the only question left is, who or what are you allowing to be the architect?